Dr. Floyd Morris.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Mr. Andrew Sharp, President of the Authentic Caribbean Disability Foundation, Ministers of Government, representatives of the Caribbean Development Bank, members of the University of the West Indies Fraternity, organizations for and of persons with disabilities, brothers and sisters and friends. A pleasant good morning to you all. It is a signal honor to be here today to participate in this very special and important conference. And when Mr. Sharp contacted me from about February of this year, signaling the intent for this conference and told me that Dr. Claire Nelson has asked him to contact me to participate in this conference. When I heard the name Claire Nelson, I never viewed it as a request. I saw it as an instruction. Because Claire and I have been friends from in the 1990s when she was with the Inter-American Development Bank. And even though we haven't been in touch with each other for a while, that bond and that friendship still lingers. And more importantly, when I looked at the theme for the conference, Community Access, Empowerment and Inclusion, you touched a nerve in my body. And I said, yes, no matter what, no matter where, I'm going to be here. And so, I am very happy for the conference and the invitation, Mr. Sharp. And I want to say that the theme that you have selected for the conference is appropriate and fittingly appropriate for the occasion. Because we have ventured in the era when there is a greater emphasis on the rights of persons with disabilities. Where persons with disabilities are not to be seen as objects of charity, but as individuals with rights, as entrenched in the various charters of the United Nations, including the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that have been signed and ratified by over 191 state parties, making it the largest treaty body in the United Nations, is what we regard in a modern era as the Bible for persons with disabilities. It luminously outlines the fundamental rights and freedoms of persons with disabilities in a centralized document. And it states the various obligations of countries in order to facilitate access, inclusion, and empowerment of persons with disabilities. Similarly, the United Nations and its various partners have developed the Sustainable Development Goals that are designed to ensure that there is the eradication of poverty by 2030, what we now know as the 2030 Development Agenda. And that SDG has outlined a number of areas in which countries must make progress for all citizens, including persons with disabilities. And critical to the SDGs and persons with disabilities, Goal 3, dealing with the situation of health. Goal 4, dealing with the situation of education. Goal 8, dealing with the situation of employment of persons with disabilities. And there are other important targets within the SDGs that countries must achieve by 2030. The fundamental question that we must ask, where are we in the Caribbean in terms of achieving the provisions of the CRPD and the SDG? And I would immediately posit to you that we are significantly behind in the Caribbean in terms of achieving the provisions of the CRPD and the SDG. A sneak preview into what are the targets and the obligations would give you an indication as to my conclusion. Because whilst all countries in the Caribbean have signed and ratified the CRPD, it is only 2 countries that have submitted their reports to the Convention on the Rights, the Committee on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to say to countries within the region that they must not view the CRPD committee as an institution that is going to judge you and give you a death sentence. That is not the role of the CRPD committee. We simply want to see what it is that you have done since you have signed and ratified the treaty. And then the experts on that committee will work with you to ensure that where the gaps are, you are making progress. And we do that through the concluding observations that each country will receive. Of the 15 countries that are part of CARICOM, only 7 countries in the region have developed specific legislation for persons with disabilities. Now, if it is that we are talking about community access, empowerment, and inclusion, disability-specific legislation is an imperative. Because once you will establish a policy framework, policy is not something that you can go to court and they rule on it just like that. You need to have a legislative framework to hold government and the other stakeholders accountable to improving the quality of life for persons with disabilities. It is the legislative framework that is going to ensure that we make provisions for affordable and quality health care for persons with disabilities. It is the legislative framework that is going to ensure that we establish an inclusive education system to make sure that persons with disabilities are learning in the same space as others without a disability. It is the legislative framework that is going to ensure that we generate an inclusive employment and labor market to make sure that persons with disabilities get employment so that they can take care of themselves and families. So if we are talking about community access, empowerment, and inclusion, we have to get it right. And that has to start with making sure that we set the systems in place to truly empower these individuals. You see, the Caribbean came out of a colonial experience where the institutions that we inherited were never friendly to persons with disabilities. Despite the fact that during slavery and that colonial experience, disability or disabling conditions were the norm, because punishment was exacted to persons in the society that led to them being disabled. Individuals' eyes were plucked out, their feet were amputated, their hands were amputated as a form of punishment. And it created a community of persons with disabilities. But there were no institutions that were established in the main to ensure that the needs of these individuals were taken to. And that colonial experience carried over into the era of independence in the Caribbean. And all our institutions, barring none, continue to be unfriendly to persons with disabilities. And we have to change that in the main to make sure that we create communities that are accessible, include persons with disabilities, and to make sure that these individuals are empowered. And here I want to call upon the Caribbean Development Bank and other development partners that are here to ensure that in your developmental initiatives, in granting loans and grants to countries within the region, make sure that you index your loans and your grants to disability as a specific indicator, so that when governments get loans and grants, provisions must be made for the inclusion and participation of persons with disabilities. If we want to see meaningful transformation, these are some of the things that must be done to ensure that we create community access, empowerment, and inclusion. And I want to say to you that it is possible for us to create that Caribbean that is inclusive of persons with disabilities, and for persons with disabilities to maximize their true potential. persons with disabilities don't want charity. What we want is true empowerment. And that is why I will be relentless in my pursuit to ensure that from Bahamas in the north to Suriname in the south, that we create that enabling environment for our brothers and sisters with disabilities. I lived the disability experience because I was never born blind. I developed glaucoma whilst I was in high school in Jamaica. And when I developed glaucoma, my grades started to plummet. And the teachers in the education system had no clue as to what to do to assist a young man who was going blind. I was allowed to pass through the education system and graduated without a single academic subject, and left at home just waiting for the dreaded moment to come. That moment came in 1989 when I got totally blind at the age of 20. And there I was staring at a gun called poverty. Because being disabled and having no academic qualification is equal to poverty. And I was strengthened with the resolve that I was not going to allow the circumstances to alter my situation. I realized that it was possible for me as a blind person to make it through education. And I went to Kingston to the Jamaica Society for the Blind, learned to read and write Braille, and at the same time restarted my education at the Michael Evening College. Within 2 years, I was able to complete my O and A-level subjects and was back on the road to recovery. I went to the University of the West Indies, where I pursued at first a Bachelor of Arts in Media and Communication that I completed in 1996, a Master of Philosophy in Government in 2000, and in 2017 completed a PhD. And the University of the West Indies has been a tower of strength in my personal development, because the institution has seen it fit to put in place measures to accommodate persons with disabilities. So whether you are at Mona in the north, or you are at St. Augustine in the south, or at Cayville further east, and Five Islands campus in Antigua, there are facilities there to accommodate persons with disabilities. And so, it is no surprising that in 2024, after tremendous hard work in the field of academia, the University of the West Indies promoted me to the rank of professor, the first in the 75-year history of the University of the West Indies. And I say all of that to say this, that it is possible for a person with a disability to achieve anything that he or she wants to accomplish in this life. Understand that it is disability, that person is able to successfully integrate themselves and become a part of the productive capacity of the Caribbean. And we must stop viewing persons with disabilities in negative light. And we must stop requiring of persons with disabilities to prove themselves, because we have seen it all over the world that once you create that community access, once you create that inclusive environment, persons with disabilities will be truly empowered, and they will make a meaningful contribution to society. And so I am calling upon all our development partners within the region to make sure that we include persons with disabilities in the development agenda. Understand that disability does not equate to inability. And I want to say to my brothers and sisters with disabilities within the region that your voice matters and your finger is important. So when election time comes, make sure that your vote is cast for individuals who are going to be advocating for your interests. And I say, no inclusion, no vote, no empowerment, no vote. Persons with disabilities must be included in the community. They must be empowered, and community access must be created. God bless you all.